Hi, I'm Matt, and welcome back to SoiLab. Today I want to walk you through our third collection where we compare these different bagged or potting soils. We got a lot of comments asking for various soils, and we're finally getting to the last ones that were requested with our Coast of Maines. So which 5 soils are we going to compare today? We're going to compare Coast of Maine Tomato and Veggies, Coast of Maine Growers Mix, that's the Stonington blend. We also have our Miracle-Gro Moisture Control, our Gro Black Gold, and finally the Sunshine Mix number 4. So what we'll walk through today are the similarities, the differences, and just my observations over this 6-week grow-in. Let's jump into our discussion. The first question that we might have is, how did we get this set up? Well, we set this up just like our other 2 collections, and if you haven't seen those yet, go ahead and check those out. They're linked below. We filled each of these containers up with equal amounts of soil, and then we've had pre-germinated lettuce and tomato. Just so we had a good look at multiple replications, we planted 2 each, lettuce and tomato, on a grid in each of these pots. For the duration of the 6-week study, we kept these all at the same moisture level. Now that meant that some might have got a little more or a little less water than the others, but the moisture level in the soil remained constant. So with that being said, what did we learn? Well, above ground, we saw 100% emergence of all plants. So all the lettuce and all the tomato that we planted did grow. So outside of that 100% germination, one of the other things that I noticed across all of the plants, the tomatoes in particular in this study, is we did get a little wilt on the leaves, especially on those older leaves. And that was probably because of slight moisture fluctuations that we had day to day. So some of the differences you can see is we definitely had some chlorosis, that's that yellowing color in these older leaves. That's especially true in the Sunshine Mix 4 as well as in the Gro Black Gold. Now in our Coast of Maine Growers Mix as well as our Miracle-Gro, we had significant growth, vegetative growth early, and it tended to weaken those stems just a little bit. And you can't see it on camera, but I actually have these propped up a little bit for filming today. They started to lean over on us. We had very consistent and continuous growth with the Coast of Maine Tomato and Veggies mix, and it's just now, in the last few days, starting to show some slight chlorosis in those older leaves, and we'll get to the why behind that here in just a moment. Now below ground in the soil, we ran the MySoil test to look at nutrient levels, so let's look at those similarities and differences next. As I dive into the data, the main similarities I see, I'm going to base off of those MySoil optimum ranges. So as we look, we see that phosphorus is in the optimal range for all of these soils, so adequate phosphorus. Our other macronutrients, such as potassium, sulfur, and calcium, all are also in that optimum range. So you can see phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium are all at or above the optimum range. Now, that's with one slight caveat that Sunshine Mix 4 was pretty low. It was at the very, very bottom of the optimum range for phosphorus. Now, that's not where the similarities end. We also see similarities in our micronutrients as a suite. All of the micronutrients in all of the soils were suboptimal. So these plants, although we didn't fertilize them, likely would have benefited from an addition of a micronutrient suite or a micronutrient fertilizer. The other thing that I think is a really notable similarity is the pH was optimal for all of these. So the range of pH values was from 6.1 to 6.8 across these. Nothing to change here. No sulfur, no lime additions needed. So, where were the differences? We saw the differences slightly in magnesium, but gosh, even when it was low, it was barely low in those, so I don't think that was a driving factor for what we're visually seeing. But we did see pretty significant differences in the nitrogen levels. So, I know you can see that on the chart here, but let's just walk through how many parts per million nitrogen, and that's nitrogen is nitrate and ammonium, were available at the time of planting. So pre-plant, we sampled each of these soils, and the Sunshine Mix number 4 was at 6 parts per million nitrogen. We're seeing that chlorosis in the older tissue first. That's likely from that nitrogen deficiency. As we move over to the Gro Black Gold, we measured this at 19 parts per million nitrogen, but we're still seeing that deficiency. Although we didn't add any additional fertilizer to any of these soils, some of these soils came with fertilizers mixed into them. These three in the middle each had fertilizer additions to the bagged soil before planting. The Black Gold, as well as the Miracle-Gro Moisture Control, both had polymer-coated synthetic fertilizers added, while the Coast of Maine Growers mix had only organic fertilizers added to it. Why do I mention this right now? Well, those polymer-coated prills that we see here in the Gro Black Gold might not have leaked out that nutrient yet, which is why we're still seeing that deficiency. As we move over to the Miracle-Gro, this was our highest nitrogen potting soil. It was actually at 238 parts per million nitrogen. We move over to the growers mix, and it was just slightly above that optimal level. I loved this level of nitrogen in this blend. It was at 67 parts per million nitrogen. And then lastly, our Coast of Maine Tomato and Veggies was sitting at just 10 parts per million nitrogen. And so I want to just highlight that really quick. We had the lowest nitrogen with the Coast of Maine Tomato and Veggies, but apparently almost the most growth. So it made me scratch my head a little bit and really think about it. If you look at that Coast of Maine Tomato and Veggies bag, you'll see that it just has 3 ingredients in it. And the first ingredient is going to be composted manure. And so what likely happened, and I'll get to how we tried to prove this out in a second, what likely happened is that composted manure continually released nitrogen to match plant demands through this 6-week grow. Now, why do I think that? Well, when I saw the data and I scratched my head, I went back to that same bag of Coast of Maine soil, I mixed it and composited it well, and took another sample and ran another soil test. And sure enough, we had 50% more available nitrogen 6 weeks later out of that same bag. It went from 10 ppm to 15 parts per million. And that was kind of evidence that in this soil that was actually watered, that nitrogen was probably cycling and matching plant need. That being said, we're just now starting to see that deficiency. I think we're starting to run out of a little bit of nitrogen here at the tail end of this study. All right, as you're looking at all these plants, I also want you to just kind of look at their growth habit, their growth form, as well as that rooting mass that you should see in the front of the pots. Certainly in these plants that had a lot of above ground biomass, we saw that reflected below ground as well. Where we had less above ground biomass, there was less root mass, and we'd kind of expect that. I think it's notable also that the growth habit or form of these plants was a bit different. In the Sunshine Mix 4 as well as the Gro Black Gold, we had a very upright vertical growth habit with very little branching. In the Miracle-Gro and the Coast of Maine, which both had the highest ppm nitrogen, that was a really bushy growth habit. They put on a lot of biomass. And again, I've got those propped up right now because they fell over during week 6 of this study. The Coast of Maine Tomato and Veggies mix had really consistent growth throughout. It's quite bushy, and those stems are very rigid in the tomatoes. Now, when we're looking at the lettuce comparisons, the lettuce is a little lower nitrogen user, so we had pretty decent lettuce growth across all these, but it seemed like the lettuce had a different growth habit, especially in the Gro Black Gold, where it was a bit more turned up. The leaves were a bit more turned up. We see that here in the Sunshine Mix 4 as well. The lettuce just struggled a little bit in this Miracle-Gro soil, and I don't have a great explanation for that for you right now, but it grew just fine, but we did see some of those older leaves get kind of chlorotic and wilted, as well as have kind of that upright growth habit as well. And you can see we got significant growth on the lettuce in both of these Coast of Maine soils. So I'd like to just recap some of what I perceive to be the key similarities and differences across all of these soils and how it impacted plant growth. From a nutrition side, a soil nutrition side, I think some of the key similarities are that the pH was perfect in all of these soils. Micronutrients were low in all of these soils, and phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and sulfur were at optimal or excess levels in all these soils as well. Now, where were the differences? There were some small differences in magnesium levels, but the main differences that drove plant growth and development was that difference in nitrogen levels. We were suboptimal with the Sunshine Mix 4 and the Gro Black Gold. We were also suboptimal, although it doesn't look that way, in the Coast of Maine Tomatoes and Veggies. Remember that composted manure likely was releasing nitrogen to match plant demand throughout this grow out, and we're just now starting to see the signs of some slight nitrogen deficiency. If you haven't checked out those other 2 collections, please check those out. They're linked in the description below. If there's other soils that you'd like to see us test, drop that in the comments below. I haven't yet started our next comparison, and I'm looking forward to testing what you want to see. As always, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, turn on the notifications to know when our next content comes out, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon in the lab.